Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for June 29th, 2020, occurred around 4:12 p.m. Eastern Time. We're taking a look here at the latest sea surface temperature anomalies, last updated as of yesterday, June the 28th. You continue to notice the continual decline of any warmer anomalies out here in the ENSO regions, and this will only continue to promote more of a La Nina background by the time we get into the winter and fall and winter of 2020 and then into winter of 2020 and 2021. We will likely see this begin to transition over towards a cool neutral or a La Nina. It is certainly possible that we get a borderline weaker La Nina rather by the time we get into the winter of this year and then continuing into the beginning of next year. It is certainly possible. And then in the Atlantic Basin, we continue to see this very warm pronounced signature, this classical phase 1 Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, and that continues to favor a very warm main development region of the Atlantic Basin, not really cooling off all that much, although it is cooling off some. There has been a cooling off here over the last several days, no doubt about it, but this area is still rather warm, about a half a degree to in some cases a full degree Celsius above the long-term average. And you notice out here also in the North Atlantic Basin, this very warm area right now that has my attention because, as we talked about the other day in our previous discussion, this actually will help to build a very strong ridge of high pressure out here, and any storms that form out in this region, as they will tend to drift more so out and away, turn out to sea, that's not going to be easily as possible with this big Atlantic basically Bermuda high sitting over top here. Very warm anomalies up here suggesting that this Bermuda high and this ridging of high pressure will be stronger than expected and the long-term average. Conditionally, that supports an increased potential for maybe some close calls, land impacts. That has implications for the Western, hemisphere, the portions of the Western Atlantic Basin, Southwestern Atlantic, the Gulf Coast states, etc. That has implications. Now, can we exactly say when systems are going to make landfall or where they're going to make landfall? No, we can't do that until a storm actually forms and we can track it. But again, this has my eye for that very reason, that it would tend to steer storms closer and closer towards the coastline. So very important to understand that fact. This cooler than normal anomalies continues to show up in the subtropical Atlantic, so this is not really becoming a basin-wide warmth so far. That would take a lot of the instability out of the deep tropics in the main development region and actually transfer that energy further to the north. We're not seeing that as of right now, so that is certainly news that the Atlantic Basin still has a very strong amount of instability in the atmosphere to work with once these tropical waves really come off and amplify. Now, taking a look here at the latest upper ocean heat content, this updated as of this morning. Again, very, very pronounced area of deep upper ocean heat content in the Caribbean and Southwestern Atlantic Basin. As you start getting up here into the upper third of the scale, the upper echelon, these greens, yellows, oranges, and reds, you're really getting that warmer water at depth. You're getting a lot more latent heat release potential, and you notice even very clearly in the Southwestern Atlantic, the Bahamas, the whole Caribbean Basin as a whole basically is well above 2017, in fact, and above 2010 as well. And you remember the 2010 hurricane season was very busy. A lot of fish storms, though, recurving out to sea, but very well pronounced deep upper ocean heat content in the Caribbean. And even out here in the main development region, you continue to notice this area nicely warming right now, and you're getting a lot of that upper ocean heat content to actually expand off to the north here. And that's only going to be continuing to occur here over the next several weeks to months as we progress further and further into the peak of the hurricane season, as these tropical waves come off more in a more robust environment out here in the deep tropics. That's only going to conditionally favor these stronger waves to develop. You can also notice where the Gulf Stream is. This is our Gulf Stream area right here, very well pronounced up here with these upper ocean heat content values, and the Gulf of Mexico is fairly warm as well in the upper ocean heat content sense. So the Southwestern Atlantic Basin, the southern main development region, I mean, the window of favorability is coming, and we're lucky that we aren't in September right now. Otherwise, we'd be dealing with a whole nother problem, and I'm pretty sure of that. So very important to understand how that actually now relates into the peak of the season as we get closer and closer. And to further that, this is the CDAS, sea surface temperatures. This is taking a look at the actual the skin temperatures, initialized here at about 7 o'clock this morning from tropicaltidbits.com. You notice here very warm temperatures here, 30 Celsius, I'm about 90 degrees here in the Bahamas, southwestern Atlantic, 31 Celsius out here across the, right there off the Tampa Clearwater area. That is very significant warmth. And pretty much the rest of the Western Atlantic Basin running area-wide about 27 to 31 degrees Celsius in spots. You also notice this is the Gulf Stream that's running up through here. Very warm temperatures, about 29, 30 Celsius. And now these sea surface temperatures are starting to basically rebound. They're starting to get their act together. And you notice out here where we had this cooler than normal area out there in the Gulf of Mexico has all since been replenished. Skin temperatures running about 28, 29, even 30 Celsius. So very important to understand. The Gulf of Mexico will always be very supportive of intense tropical cyclones in the hurricane season. We're seeing that now. And in the southeastern Pacific Basin out here, water temperatures 29, 30 Celsius. So very warm. Also notice out here near the islands about 28, 29 Celsius. 29 Celsius there in the southern main development region. So very, very warm. And that's only going to continue to amplify as we go on throughout the season. You notice out here even a patch of 30 Celsius. So you can imagine that it doesn't necessarily take a main development region hurricane. You get these tropical waves that if they can't develop out here in the main development region, they're going to find more favorable environments out here. And these water temperatures combined with these deep upper ocean heat content values is only a problem, is only something waiting to basically happen there. I'm not saying that's, we're going to get, this big hurricane, but it just has that level of look to say, if something comes along to take advantage of these temperatures out in this region, it is going to be something, all else being favorable, it is going to be something to keep mindful of. So we'll continue to watch it as we progress. Oh, that Saharan air is in here as we progress through the rest of the season. Now, take a look here at the latest cloud meteorology. This is the college page website here for the GOES 16 satellite. You notice this is our tropical wave axis that's down here. This is actually the breakoff piece that was in Vest 96L. Not really going to develop into much. In fact, very limited convection, although there is some, but very limited convection across this area as we transition and head into the diurnal maximum, basically where we get the best potential for these thunderstorms to go up around the center. But again, not really much going on. This is just a big wave monsoonal axis here, a big tropical wave axis mixed in with all of this dusty, dry Saharan air. You can see more back here over Africa. So not really going to be seeing a lot in terms of tropical development out here with this system over the next several days or so. We also have to watch another area out here over the next several days or so, only a 20% chance on that rather. But again, very dry, stable air across portions of the Western Atlantic Basin. No deep land concerns as of this point for any significant potential. And in fact, this is our MDR system, our main development region system, only a 10% chance, 48 hours and 5 days. Again, this is generally expected to head off towards the west-northwest here at about 15 to 20 miles per hour. Again, no real concerns for land masses out here, the Lesser Antilles, the Windwards, Barbados. No significant concerns, although there could be some shower and thunderstorm activity with this larger tropical wave axis as it passes here over the next several days. So portions along Barbados, the Windward Islands, Lesser Antilles, St. Lucia, the Grenadines, up towards Puerto Rico, St. Croix, those areas certainly might get some much needed rainfall here over the next several days or so, but no significant concerns in terms of any tropical development, although you could still get some gusty, squally conditions, certainly heavy rainfall leading to maybe some flooding potential, so that is certainly something to keep mindful of over the next several days. A closer zoomed in satellite shot from tropicaltidbits.com. Again, you notice this wave axis through here, but you also notice these arc clouds that are kind of moving away. There's one located right about here, and you notice how that generally moves off towards the north. This is very indicative of that dry, stable air in the atmosphere, and you notice all of this dry, particulate matter basically out here in portions of the main development region sinking in on this system. That is actually some of the leftover vorticity, little vortmax there associated with 96L. Our most concentrated area of energy is actually deep down here, but again, even that is not really bundled. Again, there was some convective activity forming closer to this area over the last several hours before that finally dissipated, and you kind of notice that big cluster of convection just really dissipating, and we're left kind of with this cluster of activity up here. But again, this dry, stable air, very indicative of these arc clouds kind of racing away from these thunderstorms. That is really indicative of that dry, stable Saharan air that's really preventing a lot of thunderstorms from going up. And you can see this here in the 850 millibar vorticity. The spin in the atmosphere about 5,000 feet off the ground. You get into these reds and whites here, and you're really getting to the higher end of the scale, your higher cyclonic spin in the atmosphere. We're actually going to take that full real quick. And again, you're going to really see there's little two vortmaxes. There's a vorticity maximum here and a vorticity maximum here. This is the breakaway energy associated with 96L, and this is just some remnant vorticity out here, but neither of these are trying to really consolidate and bundle in the atmosphere. You're not really seeing something out here, which is basically this tropical disturbance that has a fairly decent shot at becoming a cyclone here either today or tonight. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But again, this is what we would want to see out here with any areas of consolidation, and you're not really seeing that. These two areas are just very weak, kind of nebulous areas of vorticity, and not really trying to bundle. This larger kind of monsoonal wave axis out here will pass over the islands here in the Caribbean over the next several days or so. And if anything, this is actually going to aid in tropical cyclone genesis out here in the eastern Pacific Basin as we go on throughout time. So very interesting that this might actually aid in the eastern Pacific development, but in terms of the Atlantic formation, nothing expected there here over the next 5 days or so. And taking a look here at what we might be seeing out here developing across portions of the northwestern Atlantic Basin, there is an area of vorticity or an area of disturbance that is going to dive down as an area of kind of upper level low pressure dives here across portions of the southeastern United States and mid-Atlantic into the open North Atlantic Basin. With these very warm sea surface temperatures, there's certainly some potential for tropical cyclone or subtropical cyclone formation over the next 5 days or so, only given right now about a 20% chance as we go on throughout time. And in the eastern Pacific Basin, this is our little cyclone or little area of vorticity right here with a 60% chance of the next 5 days, really, or 48 hours. This is going to be heading and racing into very cool waters here over the next couple of hours or so. Not couple of hours, but couple of days. And this is really going to hinder much development, so no significant further development of this system is likely, except for really tonight or so. And you notice also an area of disturbance with a 20% chance over the next 5 days is another area of low pressure is expected to develop and move off towards the north and west here or towards the west-northwest. Again, no deep concerns for the Cabo San Lucas resort areas, which is located right here, the Gulf of California, the Baja Peninsula, or the Central American coastline and Mexico. No significant land concern threats as of right now. Again, the Eastern Pacific Basin is likely going to take over here over the next several weeks or so as we get a convectively coupled Kelvin wave passing over before it finally exits for the Eastern Pacific and into the Atlantic Basin as we go on throughout time. Now, this is very interesting. This is the 12Z GFS from tropicaltidbits.com, looking at the 700 millibar to the 400 millibar. This is basically the upper layer of the atmosphere. This is the relative humidity, and everywhere where you see these brownish colors here, this is your dense, your sinking air, your drier air in the atmosphere, and these greens indicate your favorable moisture pocket in the atmosphere. And you notice as we go on throughout time, again, this is our little kind of wave axis as we kind of reminisce through here. That's our wave axis passing through there. And you notice even out to hour 144, the main development region is basically plagued by this dry, stable Saharan air, and just dry air in particular. Something interesting trying to get going out here in the Gulf of Mexico, but this is way beyond, the hour 120 time frame, so we're not really going to pay attention to that. But as we go on throughout time, again, we're not really taking a look so much at the individual tropical cyclones. We're taking a look at the overall larger scale pattern. And you do notice that we start to get this larger area of Saharan air and dry, stable air to kind of be undercut by more of this favorable moisture axis that's going to be passing over the Atlantic Basin during the next several weeks or so. And now, again, we have to caution, this is really looking far out into time. However, this is the larger scale pattern and not so much just taking a look at, oh, is a hurricane going to form at XYZ location at what day? No. We're taking a look here at the larger basically the larger scale pattern here over a large period of time. And given that we have a convectively coupled Kelvin wave that is going to pass from the eastern Pacific Basin, where you notice all of this rising air in the atmosphere is that more favorable moisture in the atmosphere, and that's going to be shifting into the Atlantic Basin with time in the Western Atlantic Basin. And the model makes sense. It does tend to have a little bit of a dry bias, however, but the model makes sense that this area is going to become more favorable with moisture over time, and that is likely going to promote some chance of tropical cyclone formation in the Atlantic Basin as we go on throughout time into the beginning and mid part of July. And certainly once we get to the latter part of July, if the pattern still sticks around that we have currently, it is certainly looking more favorable for Atlantic tropical cyclone prospects as we go on throughout time. And this is the 12Z GFS forecast here, taking a look here at the 850 millibar vorticity, the spin in the atmosphere, 5,000 feet off the ground. From tropicaltidbits.com again, you notice this big area of high pressure that's sitting out here that's really going to hinder much of anything, as it's going to promote these strong dust outbreaks, the Saharan air outbreaks across here with this very strong African easterly jet. This is also going to cause a lot of just this screaming trade winds across here, really not going to promote much in the way of any development. And you can actually see our little wave axis is kind of sitting right through here. And you notice these very subtle kinks in the isobars here and in the kind of wind barbs through here. That is indicative of that very weak tropical wave, but it's kind of strong for June prospects, but it's weak in the model field right now, and that is just going to be moving through, no significant concerns. Again, the Eastern Pacific Basin might get pretty active here as we go on throughout time, and that's naturally expected for this time of the year. But again, the Eastern Pacific has been anomalously quiet for this time of the year. It's been anomalously quiet. We haven't even had a hurricane in the Eastern Pacific Basin as of yet. Now, that probably will change as we go on throughout the next couple of weeks, as again, we're going to get a lot more favorability in the Eastern Pacific Basin. But as we saw previously, we had a very favorable burst of activity in the Eastern Pacific, and only one storm was really able, which was Tropical Storm Boris, only a 40 mile per hour tropical storm. It was very weak, and that was the only system that came out of it. So we're kind of seeing signs that the Eastern Pacific, for some reason, isn't as favorable as, we first thought it was going to be. And typically when basins are shut down, all other basins are shut down, including the Eastern Pacific, the Atlantic Basin typically will take over. And it's only a matter of time before we, progress into a more favorable pattern for these tropical cyclones to develop and form. And taking a look here at the 12Z European forecast model, this is actually our little tropical wave down here. You notice this little closed isobar here indicating that line of constant pressure, very indicative of these tropical waves as they come across. Again, very weak in nature, maybe some sort of development out here in the northwestern Atlantic Basin as we go on throughout time. But again, you notice there's just nothing showing up here in the model field in the Euro, even out to hour 240. We typically don't look out this far. However, we just want to show this because the Atlantic Basin, it takes time to get its act together, and it's not just going to happen overnight. The basin is going to wake up at some point, and given these very strong tropical waves that we've seen right now with 96L, and other waves that have tried to get their act together in the southern MDR this year, it's only a matter of time before these tropical cyclones come off at a higher and higher latitude out here and really begin to take advantage of this warmer water and everything else kind of going for it. And it's only a matter of time before we actually get some development out here. So again, prepare. This is the time to prepare. We're in a little bit of a lull, right now. We're in that pattern in the Atlantic Basin where there's not really a lot going on. We have 96L, which is certainly a very strong indication of these very strong tropical waves that are going to get their act together by the time the peak of season gets here. And, we've already had 3 named storms in the Atlantic Basin. So very important to understand that as we go on throughout time, we're going to get more storms. It's inevitable. Where they'll end up, how strong they'll be when they get to said place, who knows? But it only takes one storm. It doesn't take a Category 5 hurricane like Michael or Dorian to ruin your life. It can be as weak as a tropical depression or tropical storm. So now's the time to prepare. If you are living in a hurricane-prone area, it is the time to prepare. And, do this while we have a little bit of a lull. Don't do it last minute when your life could be in stake and at danger. So, hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. I am Michael O'Malley, and I will see you guys back here then tomorrow afternoon. Stay safe, everyone, and have a nice day.